Hey, welcome to This Life in Tech, another episode with my dear friends. This is episode 178. I'm Jason.
And I'm going to make sure that we don't freeze up today. Dan.
I'm actually appalled right now. I don't even know if I'm TK anymore. I think I'm appalled.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, man. You know what I was thinking about this week? Check this out. And I'm being a dead serious. This is not like one of those troll moments. How strange is it that we're walking around on the same planet that the dinosaurs walked on? Like, that blew my mind this week when I really thought about it. That's crazy.
Every time somebody says that, I always think of Fred Flintstone, where people kids grew up with this impression that the pterodactyls and people were walking around together.
Yeah. What did you ask, Dan?
Are you sure they were really dinosaurs?
Yeah. I'm fucking sure, man.
Pretty sure it was just another one of those CIA tricks.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you what started this. Here's your connection. So chickens are doing great, man. The mealworm farm is online. I'm pretty close to having the next generation ready. And so we've been paying a lot of attention to the garden. And it's that time of the year where you get pest infestations like beetles and bugs and shit like that, right? And so we had a problem with some beetles on our squash plants, and we lost a couple plants. And Mrs. Pittman's not really happy about that because we eat a tremendous amount of gourds. And they're really easy because we can chop them up, cook them, and then freeze them, and we have them all winter long, man. That's our vegetables for the winter. And so she starts looking into more chickens, but chickens that can live over in the garden that'll eat the beetles but not eat the plants. And she stumbles upon these things. I'd never seen these before. They look like a cross between a turkey and a pheasant. They're called guinea fowls. And they're the most dinosaur-looking things I've because birds are really close cousins to dinosaurs. And so that's how I thought about it. I'm like, man, like, that's a legit dinosaur. The only thing that's closer to it would be like a shark or a crocodile. And I ain't getting either of those. So this is the closest I'm going to get to dinosaurs. And then I started thinking about,
how much have you lost so far?
How do you freak out the neighbors having a crocodile? Yeah,
right?
what?
Yeah. What'd you ask, Dan?
How many chickens have you lost so far? You take care of that chicken hawk?
Oh, yeah, no. Once we put the robotic owl out, man, I've zero problems, zero issues. Cool. So the chickens are doing great. Now we just got the pest infestation, but these things are surly, dude. Apparently, you just like let them go and they just do their thing, but you can't really control them.
You can't control them. You can only hope to contain them.
Right.
I can relate.
And so then,
no, Dan, we can relate.
We're not the only family in the area that had. I mean, this is all farmland, and so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to introduce like 4 to 6 dinosaurs, and they're going to rampage across the countryside, and they're going to eat everybody's stuff because they'll eat basically anything that they can fit in their mouth, like pelicans. They'll eat it. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to be responsible for that.
It's like they're like the Anchorman they're like the Ron Burgundy thing. They will say whatever you put on the teleprompter.
Yeah, well, because like the chickens are trained now, so when the sun goes down, they go to the coop. Nice. And some most of the time they make it in. Sometimes some of them are dawdling and fiddly farting around, and they don't get in before the door closes. But they've figured out how to get like under it and hang out, or they get on top of it and hang out, and they're fine. These things apparently you can't manage. They just do whatever they want. I kind of respect that. Like, okay.
So do they also lay eggs, or are they just one chicken to eat?
Well, I mean, they lay eggs because that's how they reproduce, but you ain't eating them because I don't think you can get close to them. These things are not nice. They're not nice. That's the way to put it. Like the chickens you can go over and hang out with, and they recognize you with their little bird brains, and they come and play and stuff. They like to see you. Like, it's kind of cool. They'll follow you around, and you can pick them up and handle them. Chicken's not even the roosters are pretty cool right now. But apparently these guinea fowls, dude, they're not to be monkeyed with. So,
that's funny.
Yeah. So then I started thinking about, well, man, I mean, it's been a long time since we had dinosaurs. We've come a long way as a species, and we've done pretty damn well. But how much better could we do through technology? There's your segue.
Yeah. Zen master of the segue. Well, no. So earlier in the week, I was reading an article about the NBA. So one of the side effects of the COVID is how are we going to get major sports back on the television, people playing and doing those things and do it safely. So what the NBA has done, I won't get into the mechanics of how they chose the teams for a truncated season or like that, but there's 22 teams that are effectively on the Disney compound at multiple properties. When they go there, they're given COVID tests, right? And they start this kind of quarantine period, right? And same with the media members that are there, they go through the same thing. Well, the players and anybody that's associated with basketball and basketball operations, they're given two things. One, they're given one of the Disney tags that is the LoJack effectively for your time on Disney, and they're given an Oura ring, right? And Dan, that we found out this week, Dan actually has one when we brought this up. Well, one of the concerns, and Jay Williams, who's one of the ESPN Talking Heads former player, really articulate young voice on all things sports and sports psychology and player development and at that. One of his questions is, what the most important information a player has or humans have is that PHI and PII, right? Mm-hmm. Personal information, personal identifiable information. Well, it's even more highlighted when you start talking about professional sports. So who's going to have access to all this data that the Oura ring can provide, right? And they're trying to use it as a predictive tool. They're under the guise of, hey, we want to, if somebody is going to start exhibiting symptoms, the Oura ring, in theory, will pick it up quicker, and we'll be able to isolate that person and get them tested. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, what are the bioethics behind this? And I'm not talking just in the general sense of, what we do now with HIPAA and all that stuff. There's a layer in there of business, right? You've got the Players Association and the union, and then you've got management and ownership. Well, ownership's job is to cut the best deal they can with the players, right? They know that they've got to spend a certain amount of the revenue every year on the players. There's a floor. All the contracts in Major League Baseball and the NBA are guaranteed, unlike the NFL. So the commitment you make to a player contractually is binding, right? In a way that it's not football, for example, right? So as salaries go up and up, how are we going, over that 4 to 5 year period that somebody's going to sign a contract? Well, the concern is, and I think it's a rightful concern, because it's a rightful concern in with the general population as well. If, for example, that PHI on a John Q. Citizen walking around ends up at a health insurance company, can they use that information to deny you insurance? All right. Well, in the case of the NBA, can they use that personal health information that they get from the collection of the data on that Oura ring against you in your next contract, or use it as a mechanism to negotiate a buyout, right? Those types of things. Now, I think the positive side of this, if somebody has, and I don't understand everything that the Oura ring can do, but I know that it can pick up heart anomalies and things like that for AFib and other things. Well, I think it's great because a lot of those things go undetected, especially in that age group, that 20 to 30-ish age group, because you're assuming that a high-functioning professional athlete, the mechanisms and the systems of interconnected systems of their being are functioning correctly to allow them to work at those things. What happens? What's the bioethics behind that? And how do we say, yes, we want to collect all this, but we've got to firewall it from the worst instincts of human nature and business. That's right. I thought we go this week. I thought it'd be pretty cool. It's even better now that Dan's got the ring.
Yeah. So I from a professional athlete perspective, I take the stance of this was all negotiated through the CBA, and essentially with that, you lose. You sold a lot of your rights to become a professional athlete, and therefore, you reap what you sow.
I'm not sure that this specific thing with this Oura Ring and collection of this vast amount of data was negotiated through the CBA, right? What I do believe is that they've come to some agreement to get back to work, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, baseball's having a harder time with it because they've made it solely about money, right? And you want to talk about bad optics.
Oh, absolutely.
And baseball, unlike basketball has figured out the demographic. They figured out the 18 to 45 demographic. So they grab the new young viewer, and then they get the viewer that spends the most money.
Yep.
Right. And they're not, while their fans get older, they're churning in new fans. So from a marketing and market segment growth piece, they're doing that. Baseball is not. Baseball fans look like me. They don't look like my kids.
Sure.
Right? And that's the bigger problem.
Right. So with this, it was negotiated.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, the player, I understand it, still has a choice to opt out and not go with their team without any penalty, without being penalized.
Correct.
Right. There's been
They're
a
also
couple
not
people
getting
that have done
paid
that.
then.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So they got paid for whatever they did, but it's their choice. Whereas typically, through the CBA, you don't have a choice. Like, this is what it is, and that's that.
Right.
The owners in this case, they negotiated. The players, the union accepted, with those conditions. I think when it comes to, again, back to personal, people, or rather private citizens with employers, things of that nature. Again, this is where I think of a company like Oura. I don't even know if that's what its parent's company's really name is or not, but if a company like that were to sell your data to an insurance company without providing an opt-out, which is one of these big things, because their privacy was one of the things I did read. Their privacy policy is pretty much they're keeping it to them, and they talk about not selling this data because they're looking at it for more research. If they started doing that, I think because of the breadth of a lot of these wearable technologies, I think legislation would happen pretty quickly. It would really, I think, cause some serious panic.
So let me ask you a question. Since you have it, it's a technical question. Why does the device need to transmit its data back to a mothership at all?
Why does it need to? I'm assuming based on, because it's also for research, in order for them to continue into getting more data. Now, you could probably opt out of that aspect in some way, but I don't know how you would.
Right, so there was no explicit opt-in.
Right. I mean, you're opting in by buying it.
Right.
Otherwise, it's saying don't buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was basically the way I was reading it. It's like, hey, as I was going through the ordering process for it, it's like, hey, it's either you're doing this or you're not. And, everything comes back down to the risk analysis. I'm going, okay, look, I'm in New York. I want to, I want to know in the event that I start coming down with something sooner rather than later. So that way I could take whatever necessary precautions, just because I happen to be in a hotbed for COVID, even though I feel like, hey, I'm in pretty good shape. I do everything I need to do in order to support my immune system. I still want to know, but I'm also taking a look at, all of the other things that Oura is doing, and I wanted to find it out. Now, the other thing is that, okay, yeah, I've got this Oura Ring, and I didn't have to, use my identity in order to purchase it.
Right.
I'm not as worried about me. I know how to take care of those kind of things, but not everyone does.
But to TK's point in what you're saying, that's kind of, to some degree, what bothers me about these solutions. They're fabulous pieces of technology, and I think not them themselves, because they're all prototypes, man. If you go back and you look at Fitbit and their early stuff and how trash it was, but that really started the wearable health tracking craze, and gave us, the Garmin TK and I have are pretty advanced. Even an iWatch now is pretty advanced in what it can do. Mm-hmm. Part of what bothers me is there's not a sense of, okay, as a society we could massively benefit from this. Let's all agree to not fuck around You know,
right. And it's kind of what I'm trusting that Aura is not doing, because they're saying as it's being transmitted back to the mothership, they are anonymizing your data. Now, we also know that it's, there's ways to put 2 and 2 together if they so needed to.
See, right. This is my second problem with some of these new companies that say things like, "Oh, we're collecting the data for research." Well, let me explain something to you about informed consent.
Yeah.
You have to provide me with the means to opt out at any time, and that means all of my data is immediately removed. And these companies aren't doing that. There's no fail-safe mechanism
by
which you can say, "Look, I'm done. You could take it off, fair enough, but that doesn't do anything to the data that's already been collected." And that's kind of where I go back to what I think is a reasonable solution for everybody, so that companies can be companies, and I don't begrudge somebody generating revenue and having profit. They should, right? And at the same time, I don't want us to be stifled or retarded by, I use the R word, retarded, by our inability to figure out how to wield this stuff correctly. And
don't you think it's interesting, because they're also a European company and they're supposed to be more privacy focused? So at some point, to your point, I think they will be forced, because they're a European company, to be able to do exactly what you just said, which is, hey, I want to now opt out. You got to remove all of my stuff.
That's right. If I understand the legislation correctly, through the EU, if it's from an EU country, I don't know their origin, they have to provide that now.
Well, it's a good thing we got Google.
Yeah, right.
We have the Google.
So just make the data transparent. Shit, if you want to do research, so do I. I'm an amateur. Dude, I love this stuff. This is one of the things, like TK, I love about cycling, is you can watch a lot of races, not like the CBS broadcast, but the live stream broadcasts of even amateur races, and people will overlay their data over the video feed. You can see their heart rate, their speed, their watts from all the data collection. I love that, man. As a science junkie and an amateur sports fanatic, I love it.
But look at
they're in Finland, so they're a part of the EU.
Same people that gave us the polar heart rate monitors.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, look at the whole craze with the Peloton bikes, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, 90% of that, you've taken something that largely you're isolated, you're at your home by yourself, and both visually and statistically, you've created a race and a community, mm-hmm. right? That is amazing to me, right? Mm-hmm. That, you might get on there, it might be 10, 20, 30,000 people doing that ride at any given time, right? And so you're not only racing against yourself to get better, you're trying to statistically put yourself into a different category of being more fit and being more highly ranked. That touches the thing you need to have mass adoption, right? I have to feel like I'm getting better, right? I mean, my fitness level needs to go up, but I also have the need to compete, because most people do. Whether you say it or not, everybody has the need in their mind, I want to be better, right? How do I gauge that? Well, if I'm lifting weights, hey, I lifted more than I did before, right? I'm getting better. Well, cycling and some of these other things, but being able to watch that, I mean, that's been around for a while, but I mean, now how quickly we can, the real time aspect of being able to do that. But I think for athletes like that, that data has been in the public domain for a long time, especially in cycling. I mean, when you look at, whether you talk about doping or anything else, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think in a large measure, when it comes to those types of that type of athlete with kind of endurance sports like that, humanity and that population of fans turned a blind eye to some of the doping or those types of things, because you're saying, hey, we're going to have you scale a vertical, like a vertical climb effectively. You're going to do it amazingly fast. You're going to ride 200 to 300 miles, and you're going to get around and do that every day for 2 weeks and not have any noticeable fatigue. Well, there's only so much massage and nutrition you can do, right? It's like in baseball when you start talking about the steroid era, right? All of a sudden, Bonds and Sosa started hitting home runs and jacking them to the moon. Their point was, hey, you still have to make contact with the ball, and it's considered to be the hardest thing to do in sports, right? But again, steroids aren't about, or performance enhancers in this thing, they're not about hitting that ball. They're about recovery, right?
Mhm.
They're about being able to play every single day at a very high level and not have the effects of a long. That's one of the hallmarks of, of that Ironman thing, whether it was Gehrig or good Lord, what's his name?
Ripken.
Ripken, right? Is their ability to day after day grind through a 162 game schedule in 184 days, right? That's the amazing part. You look at cycling in particular, that it's an unreasonable expectation to think that people are unenhanced doing that.
Sure.
Right? It's just not. I mean, like, you can't sell it. That's why you look at Lance was a great day rider. He's a world champion but long before he became a great a tour rider, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, he did the right things. He got rid of that triathlon mindset and lost all his upper body weight and got down to the point where he was a life support system for his legs.
Yeah.
But then he got with the program and did what everybody else did.
Well, and that's what I love. And this is interesting. The other device I've personally been looking into is a device called Lumen that measures CO2 exhalation and then can measure what type of state your body's in, whether you're burning carbs or fat. And there's all kinds of science that goes into it. It's a pretty interesting device. It's like $300. What interests me about it, first of all, is we've always, for a long time on this show, talked about biohacking. Mm-hmm. Right on the front page of Lumen's website, it talks about, hold on, I'll quote it. The first device to hack your metabolism. So how interesting is it that now hack, or to hack, has been taken out of the technological realm and put into this biology realm, right? This physiology realm.
It's been put into a non-technology form.
Right.
Yeah.
In the performance realm.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say real quick, what I love about this is this can approximate to some degree what traditional performance enhancers would do for you on a much smaller level, right? I mean, this ain't going to make you a tour rider, but by tweaking little things in a collection, you could hack your metabolism and at least transcend what you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Well, I think it's this. I think we know much more about human performance today than we did 3 or 4 years ago. And it changed. It's a rapidly changing set.
Yeah.
Services, like Dr. Rhonda's service, like Geno Pallet, using your DNA and performance metrics to start saying, hey, here, you're going to be more efficient if you eat this way. You're going to be more efficient if you do this. The other thing I think we've really gotten a handle on, and especially, hold on, I got multiple things happening here at one time. So I started this update for this thing started to take over. But when you start saying, hey, what was the preferred method to cut body fat? It was to do more cardio, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we now know that's actually counterintuitive, especially as you get older, right? When you get into that 35 plus age range, now it's more HIIT training, high intensity interval training, not because that cardio is just going to burn calories. It's not going to burn fat. I want to target this. So now we understand the body mechanism a little bit better. I would love to get one of those Lumen things. And while I'm in the middle of doing a HIIT workout, start using that to say, I need to be in an optimal position to burn fat. And you say, kind of right now, hey, if let's say I do a circuit that's a 4-minute HIIT circuit. Well, no matter what my heart rate is, by 2 minutes, I want to be back. By 2 minutes rest, I want to try to be back.
Right.
Well, what if that for me, because I've achieved a certain level of fitness, is now only a minute and a half? Well, now if I breathe out and I'm getting near real-time feedback on my device, it'd go, no, get back to work, dummy. Right. Yeah. And now you can, when people, I think, especially when we start talking about fitness and people say biohacking or stuff like that, what they're saying is, how can I increase efficiency?
Yeah.
Right? And, I'm not I think in true, CrossFit, I think started out with the right intent that, hey, you're competing against yourself. For example, if I can do 10 pull-ups and you can do 15, Well, if you do 14 pull-ups and I do 11, I'm actually having a better workout than you are because I'm increasing my performance, right?
Right.
But now when you start talking about some of the very specialized fitness per the individual, it's like how is my work increasing?
Yeah.
Right? And what's my efficiency in my work, right? And I mean, you guys know I just did a big month-long, really highly directed study with amazing coaching and amazing nutritionists, amazing, masseuses and chiro and everything like that. And it's amazing how quickly, and everything was monitored, right? Everything I put in my mouth to eat, I was properly hydrated, got my sleep. 3 times a week I was at chiro. I was getting manual manipulation to get rid of and break up the myofascia. And more importantly, I was working out twice a day with somebody watching everything I did. And tomorrow's workout was predicated on what we did today. And the next thing, it was a building block theory. And it was taking the systems of your body and saying, hey, in my case, you're not 25, you're not 35 anymore. You have to think about this differently. So how do you...
You're not even 125 anymore.
I am a fit 176. But the nature of how we think about what you want, what's the outcome, right? That was the first thing I was asked. What do you know? I want to put on lean mass and I want to lose body fat, right? Mm-hmm. But we also think differently about body fat, right? Because our ability to measure and quantify that quickly is different today than it was shortly ago, right? And it's, if you think like the difference between men and women, it's changing today. But you look at people in their 40s, women were taught, hey, 5'8", 125, they were given this matrices of how tall they should be and how much they should weigh. Whereas guys, you're always like, hey, look in the mirror if you like the way, that kind of thing. And we work from that way. And so that's a pretty good gauge, right? That, okay, I've either have abs, I don't have abs, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting, whatever you want to do. The visceral fat, the fat around your organs and inflammation are a much larger driver of overall health, right? Yeah. In the study, I put on I think 8 pounds of muscle, but I lost 4 pounds of visceral fat, right? And so the name of the game for me, because of my arthritis, is I always want to do everything I can do to lower my inflammation, right? Mm-hmm. It all starts internally with your soft tissue organs. And so between blood tests, genetics, and it helps you to create and maintain a diet, right? For me, the perfect thing would be to go get blood test every month, right? And create, I mean, it's kind of, at some point thing, but what type of blood test, right? And when we start talking about the bioethics of that, if that's an athlete, right? How are we going to predict performance? Right. And who gets coaching when they're 9 and 10, right? How do you, how does that, if we really get down to the weeds of that, who gets left behind? I'll give you an example. When I went through SEAL training, and this is back 30 plus years ago, it was looked at as very inefficient. And that's like from an oversight financially. Like you start 100 dudes and 13 graduate, right? Nobody runs a business that way where you have a 13% success rate. But we're not looking for a business outcome. We're looking for an outcome, right? And as a community, they were getting what they wanted. So they brought in some psychiatrists and sociologists, and they said, hey, they're like, can we create a written test and have an interview to predict who's going to be successful with this, right? And so all 160 dudes that I started training with, we all took this test. We all got an interview. And they predicted before we went through Hell Week, which is where most of the people go by the wayside, who was going to make it, who wasn't. I was one of the guys that wasn't going to make it, right? Strangely enough, 11 of the other 12 guys that made it were guys that weren't going to make it. And they were like, okay, we're not asking the right questions, right? We all took the same test again at the end of training. And at the end of training, all the difference between somebody that made it and somebody that didn't make it, because if you dropped out, you had to take the test again, was the folks that made it were more resistant to authority. They were angrier. Well, yeah, because we just got the crap kicked out of us for 6 months and we're tired of people telling us what to do 24/7, right? But you can't, it proved that from a psychological perspective, you can't prove who's going to succeed, right? Because it's not about It's not, it's what you have in here as opposed to your ability to do push-ups or anything else. Now that we can physiologically grab that and monitor it in near real time with an Oura Ring or similar devices, or hey, you're out there on the beach running around, we think you can put out harder, breathe into the lumen. Boom. Yes, you still have the capacity, right?
Right.
I think that tool right there to tell somebody, to show somebody, like, because your mind wants to quit long before your body does, right? And we always say, we call it the 40% rule. When you feel you can't go any further, you've only exhausted 40% of your internal resources. And once you truly buy into that, you become a more limitless athlete and a limitless person, right? And
exactly.
How can we do that now? It might be the ring, but I'm more intrigued by the Oura because I can be, or the Lumen, because I can be in there and I can basically get after it and it goes, boom, you can put out harder. So now what am I doing the next one? Now, when I get, and I'll do the ski erg a lot. I really like that for over body, like getting your heart rate up, putting something. I'm looking at it more as I want to beat my previous time. If I've done 7 or 8 rounds of that as part of a bigger circuit, I want to try. If I do 200 meters in 40 seconds, at the end of it, I not only want to do 40 seconds, I still want my work output to be the same so that every stroke I take, I'm getting the same efficiency. Right. That's simple. That's a physics problem, right? More than anything else. I have work output and then I need efficiency. And that's how we build machines, right? In the mechanical world, that's how you build a machine. I want it to have the greatest output with the most efficiency. Well, why don't I want to do that as a human? I do. And especially getting older, right? I'm a big believer. I want to, trademark this phrase. I want to stay younger longer.
That's right.
Because like age or being young is not about birthdays, right? I know people that are 40 years old that act like, emotionally and physically, they're old people because they want to give up, right? Give me all the tools that you can give me to help me stay younger longer. The biggest impediment to it, though, is the conventional healthcare model that we have. Right? Because getting me to be healthy longer doesn't help their bottom line out. Right?
And what I don't understand about the healthcare industry, just as a whole, is how is that industry a for-profit model?
Because we allowed it to be earlier. No, actually, so the federal government, if you agree with the one-payer system, I typically don't. Single-payer system, which turns out to be usually government managed. Having lived in countries that have the single-payer system, there's always a way out, right? Even we were at Sound Circle, the folks that moved to Switzerland, everybody gets healthcare there. Well, no, really, everybody gets to wait in line at a hospital, or you can buy your way out of it, right? And you can buy your way out of it, which is what we did for all the employees there. And it costs us like $500-600 a month. They get a little extra card. They go to different hospitals. They move to the front of the line. They get all the tests they need when they need it, right? So the empathy that people try to have for a single-payer system is usually misguided. Right? Because if you think people are waiting in lines right now for COVID testing here and sitting around because the system is overrun, well, the system is designed on a financial model, not a healthcare model, right? More importantly, it's the dovetail of the healthcare system and the big pharma system, right? And so we're not creating healthy people, we're creating customers.
Yeah.
If you buck that system, that's when conventional medicine gets in your way.
Yeah, it's healthcare as a service. It's a subscription model.
Right. And if you go back to
monthly recurring revenue.
Right. When the government put wage and price controls on a lot of big businesses, how did they attract and keep great employees with benefits and great healthcare plans? Like my dad was a General Electric employee. They had unbelievable healthcare, and that was one of the hallmarks. And, it's part of the thing why mobility of healthcare wasn't a big deal until people didn't stay at companies to get the golden watch, right? And he's got a great job at a great company, and boom, you're going to grow in that company, right? And I mean, by the time my dad retired after being there 30 plus years, he had so much vacation, he couldn't use it all every year, right? And you were building up that longevity, and we're giving you a lifestyle just good enough to keep you there, right? Well, if you look at it, we want to get into the healthcare thing. The original statement for going to ACA by the president at the time was there are 45 million uninsured Americans. Right? And so we're going to annex 14% of the GDP for 45 million uninsured. Hey, guess what? I got a solution. Give them each $1 million and tell them to go out and buy the best healthcare program. That's $45 million. We're done. Right? The minute that we exempted companies to get buy-in for ACA was the minute everybody should have known it was all BS. Right? Because if all these Fortune 50, Fortune 500 goes, hey, we're not going to participate. And then they said, well, actually, cost went up. Well, no kidding, because you added an extra layer of bureaucracy. The insurance industry, which, by the way, is state-run, it's not a national company. There's 50 different Blue Crosses, for example, right? Because of the way it's set up. So if we say we're really using the 10th Amendment in business, right, because we want all of these to be state-run, they weren't just going to pack up ship and go home, right? So now you've added an extra layer of bureaucracy. Of course, it's going to be more inefficient, and it's going to be, but they're still not concerned about health and wellness, right? I think if you look back to the HMOs, when HMOs first came out in the 80s, they were all about health and wellness. It didn't catch on, right? 78% of people in this country are overweight. I'm not talking about the obese and morbidly obese go to about 48 to 50% of that. People go to the doctor to be given a pill, to be given the easy button, right? And I'll get on my horse about this all day long, right? This is, and like I said, you guys watched me try to kill myself when I was at Silent Circle by working too long and not getting into this, taking a holistic view of looking at yourself. And, that piece right there is more than, but why? Because people have no self-discipline, right? And some of my European friends, and like when I was over in Kosovo last year, somebody said, America's amazing because your poor people are obese. Right? It's the only country on earth where the poor people are obese, right? And they go, that's amazing that you can keep them fed. Well, we don't keep them fed, right? We slowly kill them by giving them low-grade processed foods.
Right.
And what do all those low-grade processed foods do? They cause inflammation. And if we get to the heart of it, that most of the bad things that happen to you, extraneous of just being overweight, are facilitated, or at least given a ramp to really get after you by inflammation. Nobody talks about that when you go to the doctor. And if you bring up anything, I got into it with my GP. He was like going on about my diet and what I eat and what I don't eat. Well, my labs are great because I don't put a lot of crappy fat in my body. I don't, genetically, I'm not supposed to have a lot of carbs. Well, that carb, like, look, you're telling me to go eat whole, white breads and stuff like that, lose the food pyramid, right? It's like, why? Well, because that's what the hospital group is indemnified against, right? Because and that's a federal guideline. Even if you use the new food plate model, if they're using that federal guideline and somebody keels over because they were doing it, or they have an adverse reaction, by being fat or more inflamed or whatever, that they're covered. But when you sit down and say to a medical professional, in the 8 to 10 years between the first class you took in college and you were allowed to touch another human being with a medical license, how many hours did you spend on the relationship between nutrition and the human body? The answer is 0, by the way. And the AMA just threw a fit because they were asked to include 8 hours of continuing education units in nutrition. Like, just give them the food pyramid and move on. Right? Everybody wants to give you a pill. Well, what are the bioethics of me saying I'm not going to play by that system? I'm going to go get my own labs. I'll pay, and I want to know exactly what I'm putting in my body, or I know exactly what I'm putting in my body. I want to know what the outcome is. Right. And with the amount of refined foods that we eat, what do I have to supplement in the case of vitamins, amino acids, and things like that, based on the diet I'm eating? Right? You can't go to a general practitioner that really has a handle on that, unless they make a lifestyle choice.
And I think that's why the medical profession, much like the higher education system, is going to have to go through a forced transition, because in much the same way that we're very close, if not already at the point where you don't need me to be the traditional professor where I stand there and give you all the knowledge I have. That's not the right model anymore, right? You can go get knowledge wherever you want. What you can't get without me is how to navigate it optimally for what you want to be. That's my value, right?
It's more of a Sherpa model at this time.
That's right. And I view the medical industry as the same way. I don't need you as a diagnostician. The web does a great job of it if you take it seriously, right? And AI is really good at diagnostic prediction. I don't need my GP to do that. What I need my GP to do is the same thing, to be a Sherpa, to guide me through a selection of criteria that get me to where I want to be. And
it's a medical coach. It's no different than I have an executive coach. I've got a sports coach. It's my medical coach to help me reach that optimum performance of what it is I'm trying to achieve.
Like the rise of boutique care, like for GPs, and these, I mean, it's not cheap to do. I think, sometimes you might pay like $1,000 a month just to have access to that guy, plus then whatever your insurance, all those other things, right? But people are being more selective about who they talk to. Now, the bad side of this is sometimes people are going to doctors until they get to a guy that's a pill dispenser.
Yeah,
that's true.
And give them what they want, right? But the other piece of this, and like when I start talking to some of the other doctors I go to and things like that, and they're like, "Oh man, there's a great boutique physician." Well, it's like, okay, I'm not there yet, but I always laugh when I hear doctors bitch about like WebMD or all these other resources, like the internet. It's like, well, what are they doing? You're getting a more informed customer. Now, I think it's just like anything else. I'm going to read that and go, okay, that makes sense to me, but I want to do a double check, and that's when I want to go to my Sherpa and say, hey, I read this on the internet. Here's my genetics. Here's my thing, because all of that should be in the medical thing. The other thing is the predictive analytics of genetically what you're predisposed to is probably like a nascent thing right now. And I think it's fascinating. And for example, like I've because of my arthritis, I said, I'm going to start eating in a fashion that I do everything I can proactively to cut inflammation out of my body. And so I did. And I feel amazing. I was on meds I'm not on any of that stuff anymore. Well, then when I, have used my DNA at different things, I got back that genetically from an eating perspective, I need to have a low carbohydrate diet, right? And so my labs had told me that I was deficient in vitamin D and some other things. So I'm taking those supplements. When I got the genetics back, the genetics said you were predisposed to be either low in this and high in this, and it correlated directly with what the blood test said. That blind survey to me is much more scientific and much more comforting to me to say, okay, I want to continue down this path, than arguing with a doctor that by employment agreement has to push a certain agenda.
Right.
Yeah. And we're all fortunate that we're able to afford to do these tests. We get some gadgets, things like that. And so when I was talking with Lee Chambers from Essentialize, at one point he wasn't as fortunate because he wound up getting this rare form of arthritis, and for 9 months he was basically bedridden. So he had to actually live all of the things of his education of doing it. And he said, there's a simple thing that we can all do, and I had to do this. Just keep a journal. Yeah. I ate this food. How do I feel an hour later? How do I feel 4 hours later? And if you don't feel well, don't eat that food. Eventually, you're going to find out, it takes longer. But if you don't have the money, then you can do it through a journal, and you're going to get pretty close.
Right. Yeah, and that's when you go to and I'm not promoting this, I'm just making an observation, which I think has some fact accuracy in it. If you go to a traditional medicine or a homeopathic route, that's why they almost all start with, okay, strip everything out of your diet, only eat a bland food, and then over a period of time, introduce these different types of macronutrients and see when the inflammation hits. Every acupuncturist I've ever talked to or gone to does it that way. And they do it that way for a reason. And so that's their folk shaman way of doing what now we can do through technology if we have the means to do it. And I love that.
It's like rebooting your Windows computer.
Right. Well, I mean, but think about it. That's the scientific method, though, right?
It is.
If something's broken, and there's multiple things that could be broken. If I change two things and it works, how do I know which one was broken?
That's right.
I don't, right? So you start into that scientific method of I'm going to change one thing at a time. I think, I joke about for those of you that remember the Riff truck, the reading is fundamental truck. I enjoy, most people now, they just want somebody to tell them what to do. And if you own you, right, and own your being a little bit more, both from how you deal with other humans as well as how I take care of myself, like you've got bad arthritis, you got inflammation. You don't have to read too much. You just type in, what foods cause inflammation? And they'll give you in general terms, all these things.
Yeah.
Processed carbs, all these things, sugar, right? And all, in particular, and so it's relatively easy to make some changes. But most of it is a discipline issue, right? People just don't want to do it, right? They're like, oh, I really like this. Well, okay, now you're appealing to your emotional self, not your logical self. Well, my logical self doesn't want to hurt, right? And who wins that battle?
Yeah.
Right? Even like I love beer. I've stopped drinking beer because there's no thing, and even limiting, other things. But you do have to take ownership of yourself, and that's the hard piece, right? And in anything, right? But specifically when it comes to, because people have a great emotional attachment to food, right? And if you think about it from a love perspective, like what's one of the greatest things you can do for somebody is you can feed them, you can help keep them alive, you're sustaining life, right? You're showing them that you care about them by feeding them, right? Mm-hmm. So that, and the other thing, I read a great meme on it the other day, and it was, is the clean your plate mentality, right? My parents were Depression era parents, and it's like, clean your plate. Well, if a child says they're full, let them go. Right. Because even if they're not, and they're just trying to pull a fast one, when they're hungry 2 or 3 hours later and it's time to go to bed, they're going to learn a lesson. Right.
Right.
But do I load as much food on that plate as humanly possible just to try to get the kid to eat something and fool them into it? Right. I mean, there's the psychology of getting children to eat correctly. Or am I creating a long-term psychological issue where you feel that you've got to clean your plate no matter what, and you're starting to put people in a bad position do that, right? And so I think there's a thoughtfulness about it that there's, how do I create that discipline, right? And you see it in young athletes, right? It's really hard. There's Kelsey Plum played for the University of Washington, and she's unbelievable. She was the first pick in the WNBA draft. She's a great player. She wasn't highly recruited out of high school. And her thing was like, I didn't get it till junior year, right? So she wasn't on the national radar at 8th, 9th, 10th grade, right? She got on the national radar junior year. And what she did was she goes, I finally got serious about wanting to get healthy and eat healthy, not eat like a 15, 16-year-old where you're just eating, your metabolism's racing. So effectively, externally, you can look and it looks like you can eat whatever you want. But internally, you're not feeding that system for optimal performance. And she changed what she did, right? And I use girls basketball because it's close to me because with my daughter, right? But you look at a lot of these girls, they show up to college and they're really rail thin, or they're overweight, right? And they can move and everything, but they're not efficient, right? Because they've never had nutrition coaches, they've never had a weightlifting coach or some sort of coach outside of just coaching basketball. Crystal Dangerfield was an amazing player coming out of high school, one of the best. I think she was from Tennessee, and she held this scoring record, and she went to UConn. And she was 5'5", 5'6", and she was rail skinny. She came back after her freshman year in the sophomore season. She was jacked, right? She got in the gym. She got, number one, it's protecting against injury. Mm-hmm. But number two, your endurance for the game and everything like that, because you're gonna go from playing 32-minute games to 40-minute games, and that doesn't sound, that extra 2 minutes a quarter doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, especially in her case where she's a point guard and she's on the floor for most of the game, right? And that I think
that's up over the course of a season.
Right. And it's funny. It's like, because my daughter goes to private school, they're not limited to the amount of games that they can play. Public school has a certain amount of games in
Right.
They're saying, well, we're keeping it equal for every team. In some cases, I think, especially the younger grades, like, JV basketball and stuff like that, you're good because the kids are still forming and they're growing so fast. How many can they play, right? Well, you can see last year, because most of those schools played 22, 23 games. We were playing 31, 32 games, played some tournaments, some scrimmages. That by the end of the season in the playoffs, you could see the girls starting to get worn down because it was all those extra minutes, right? And how are we asking those athletes to perform? And more importantly, what are we doing, right? And I think whether it's health, food, your relationship with your nutrition, and what you're doing for exercise, there has to be some specificity to it. What's my goal?
Yeah.
Well, my goal is to play basketball. The exercises and stretching and everything I do is going to be somewhat specific. It has to be specific to that. Otherwise, the players are going to get injured because they're doing random stuff for no reason, right? Same with football. Like, give me a football player, give me a basketball player. And, okay, how I lift weights, how I move my body, and the biomechanics, they have to be different, right? If we go out into the population as a whole and say, look, and I had a doctor say this to me when I was going to paramedic school years and years ago. He said, look, we all have the same parts. Not everybody's work the same way.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You're between Usain Bolt and me, right? Or any great, or Michael Jordan and a player that doesn't get off the JV team, right? All of this, both that, you all have the same, you all have the same muscular stuff. Everything's the same. What's the difference, right? And if we take that approach to overall health, especially with regards to food, and we take it seriously, and what's the hard thing to do about public health? Break people's addiction to sugar.
Oh yeah, that's
right? In all its forms, right? High fructose, whatever. Break people's addiction to sugar, right? That causes more problems than anything else. I think we've talked about it here before. I was with a group of people, and they were all AIDS researchers, and they are at the cutting edge of making HIV chronic on the continent of Africa, right? Which they've done, right, effectively. And they were asked a question by somebody in the audience, and these are doctors. There were orthopedic guys there. I mean, there was all matters of doctor, not just these epidemiologists that are getting after HIV. The question is this: you have to accept one of these two maladies. You can't say no to both of them. Which one's it going to be and why? You either get diabetes or HIV. En masse, without prompting at the same time, every one of them said they want HIV. Now, dovetail that to the early 80s when that was a death sentence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And somebody will go, why? And they go, look, we know exactly how HIV metastasizes. We have treatment for it. And what's going to happen now are HIV patients are going to die of obesity. They're going to die of hypertension. They're going to die of diabetes, just like everybody else in the globe. What we don't know is how diabetes functions. And they said, but what we do know is that if you unlock your relationship to sugar and get rid of it, you're going to be much better.
Yeah.
Right? And he was very adamant about it. He said, look, diabetes is, in some cases, it's, you're destined to fight that battle. He goes, but you can mitigate the side effects by discontinuing your adverse relationship with sugar. He goes, and that's on a whole host of other things. He goes, the less sugar you can put in your body, the better off you're going to be. He goes, and that's with HIV, that's with anything. And it's totally true. Like once people have broken that addiction, what do you get from people like, oh man, this just tastes way too sweet. Okay, great. You've went and broken your addiction to sugar.
Right.
I mean, I was talking to a gentleman, 72 years old. He's in good health and like that, but he likes to drink sweet tea, and so what he's done is gone to one of the chemicals, like whether it's the pink stuff or the Splenda or whatever. Yeah. I'm like, go get monk fruit sweetener. Right? It doesn't have the adverse glycemic effects and everything else, and it's natural. It occurs on planet Earth without very much refinement. Right. And what I think you have to say is go, look, we're not always asking you to be perfect. I just want you to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday at everything you do. And whether that's your fitness, your health, your education, your relationships, however you quantify that, how are you doing that? but there's
Right.
no interest from healthcare or anything else to make us do that, right? Because at the end of it, if you're healthy, what's not happening? You're not spending copious amounts of money on healthcare,
Right.
right? And
Well,
I'd
and
rather spend money on good quality food than doctor's visits.
And I think that's what's so glorious about some of these technologies is they really, in the context of the system, empower you to take control if you choose to, right? I mean, that's what they're really enabling you to do, and now you can be kind of your own Sherpa in some ways.
No, it's my hobby, right? As much as anything else, right? And say, hey, I want to be younger longer. How am I going to do it? I'm fast. It's like, it's like the reason I wanted to do that study and go to Virginia High Performance for the last month was because there's people there that are smarter than I am about this stuff, and how we lifted, how we talked about fitness is different today than it was when I was young, right? And certainly with the nutrition piece, and even something as simple as reading the label.
Yeah.
Right. There's, you'll see nutrition facts on the back of the panel, the facts panel, and then there's supplement facts. Well, within the supplement facts, there's multiple supplements facts panels. They're going to outlaw a couple of them because they're not really declarative, but they kind of look like they're nutrition panel facts, but they're not. Right. And, should we as a nation commit to saying, hey, we're going to require everybody to take a nutrition class to get out of high school?
Right.
More importantly, okay, so now when you say that, whose nutrition class are we talking about?
Exactly.
Are we talking about the food pyramid class, or are we talking about actual how food affects your body?
Right.
The second one's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're gonna have kids go home and you're gonna pit them against their parents who learned under another method and probably don't want to hear hey, mom and dad, don't eat that. It's not good for you.
Yeah, right. That's high friction.
Right. And so if you look at the new way they teach math, like the Common Core math, I have a friend of mine, and I agree with him, because it's just a way to separate kids from their parents academically. So now kids have to rely more on the school, on a state function, than they do the relationship with, their parents. Right. And luckily I always said, if that was the case with my kids, that I would be like, look, just show your work.
Yeah.
Right. And if they want to mark you down wrong because you didn't do, like for division, the lattice work, I don't understand how you can pass the test, pass any test in a half an hour if they give you more than one problem, just because of the arts and crafts you got to do around it. But more importantly, when you go to take a standardized tests are geared around understanding the principles of math. They're not geared, it's not about the mechanics of doing it out. You should be able to look, and we always joke about the SAT answers at 10 or 10 million. Right. It's geared towards understanding the mechanics of that that process. All I'm saying is, hey, if you want to get bigger, better, faster, and you want to do it, a big part of it's nutrition. Let's teach people the mechanics of that relationship between what you put in your body and what the output is.
Yeah. Well, and I'll end with this, and this is again where I think the two tie together as a Sherpa of sorts. Because what we don't teach is how to derive the discipline necessary. This is what I mean. Okay. So we'll say to somebody, hey, your goal should be to lose weight. That's not sustainable for most people because it doesn't mean anything. Here's the correct way to structure that goal. Get up and put your fucking running shoes on. That's the goal. Do that. Well, because once you get the shoes on, the hard work's done, right? Now you just go do it.
It's twofold. Yes, you have to take, it's like anything else. I've got to take, here's my dream. What's the actual plan? And where's the execution, right? The old adage is, knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Execution is power.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
and when we start talking about changing the way the body looks, right? In most cases, we're talking about weight loss, right? But just because of, like I said, 78% of people are overweight and 78% of people want to make a change. Right? Well, I don't know if all of them want to make a change, but some of them are like, hey, I can't live like this, right?
Right.
But then we tie it to a dirty 4-letter word, diet, right? If you change the paradigm of how you talk about it and say, I want to be successful at life. I want to have a life success. And part of that is I don't want to feel bad. Don't start with hey, I want to look like this. I want to have big shoulders. I want to have a small waist. I want to do, whatever it is. I want to lift. I want to do things. However you define that life success, and say, I want life success. Part of life success is being healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're healthy and you're not in pain and all these other things, everything else you do in your life is going to be easier. And so when you say I'm on a diet, it implies a start and a finish. Right? If I say I'm going to have life success, and life success needs to revolve around a pattern of behavior that leads me to feel and be better tomorrow than I was yesterday, you're
Exactly.
going to see an easier chance. But guess what? Can Nutrisystem sell as a life success? No, I lost 32 pounds in 5 weeks, right? And everything's a finite period of time, right? Because how quickly can I do something to look different, feel good about it, and then go back to my old behavior?
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
you can eat a lot and not get fat. It's just what you put in your body, right? And it's people think of this, the concept of diet as sacrifice, right? You have to think of the concept of life success as change, right? And if you're comfortable being uncomfortable and can change, then your life success metrics everywhere go up.
Yep.
And I think that's the paradigm. But again, how is the business of healthcare interfere with that?
Yeah.
Well, so it's really, the way the analogy, I could run 10 miles a day, but if all I'm eating is McDonald's, no matter what I'm doing, even though I'm burning all of those, calories away,
You're limiting yourself.
I'm not getting to my potential, and I still am not healthy. I mean, the goal is to live a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
And that requires, it's fuel. What I'm putting into my body is what I'm eventually going to get out.
Yep.
In terms of everything, whether it be physical performance, mental performance, even emotional. I mean, it affects every part of us. So,
oh yeah, no doubt. All right. I mean, like I joke. There's a guy. I think, as folks, people that stay younger longer, especially mentally, they're good readers.
Yeah.
Right. They're diligent about, hey, I'm going to devote time to this, and I'm going to, not. You always learn something, which I think is huge. Right. But you're also keeping your brain fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think people that think a lot and have to think a lot, they stay younger for long periods of time because, if you believe in, which I do in the whole neuroplasticity thing, it's just like anything else. You want to be strong, you have to exercise. Well, I want to be mentally strong. I've got to exercise that. And how do I do it? It's through contemplation, and reading goes a long way to that. Right? I think, the older I get, the less the television's on.
Yeah.
Right. And because I'm not looking to just be fed information. I want to go out and find it, even if it's in the long form, or while I'm watching TV, hey, that's pretty interesting. Boom. I'm going to go find a book on it or find something else to listen to.
There you go.
Yeah.
Listen to this podcast, This Life in Tech, or The Layer with our dear friend.
Yeah.
Dr. Dan.
Yeah. Doctor. All right, my friends. You all have a great week.
You as well.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. See
Don't
ya.
eat any cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, have mercy on all of us. Good night. Bye.